What's up everybody? Welcome back to my YouTube channel and to another video talking Worlds 2020. Today we saw Down Gaming matching up with DRX, and to me it was the anticipated matchup that we've already seen in the LCK finals, where Down Gaming were already able to 3-0 DRX and they did it again today. So not a surprise for me today, probably not a surprise to you either if you've seen yesterday's video. Tomorrow we're gonna have another domestic matchup with JDG going up against Suning, and we haven't seen this matchup since the regular part of the summer season, because in the playoffs and obviously in the regional qualifier, these two teams didn't match up. So first of all, I want to dive into the historic matchup of these two teams this year, and we only got two best of threes to look at. Because since LPL is so big with so many teams, the teams only play one best of three a season against each other, compared to two best of threes that the LCK teams play each other and two best of ones that the LEC and LCS teams play each other. So we got one best of three from spring and one best of three from summer. The spring best of three obviously has little weight right now because it's months ago. There has been a lot of patches since. The meta has changed dramatically, and also back then JDG had to play with a different top laner since Zoom had to sit out for a time because of the whole COVID pandemic. And so we have a series on our hands where, for example, the Poke Varus was still a thing. He was still OP. JDG was playing with a different top laner, so the results from this series are not really applicable to this upcoming quarterfinals, but I think some trends can still be identified and we can take them forward. And one of them was that Angel, in my opinion, was very good at containing Yagao, at using that quote-unquote weak point of Yagao for JDG. I think there's other names on JDG that stand out first, your Zoom, your Kanavi. Yagao sometimes is talked about as like the one of the weaker LPL mid laners at least, and Angel was very much able to outperform him over the series, I think. Also, Bin was able to go head to head with 705 in the top lane. That was the top laner that JDG brought in for Zoom, and he was able to outperform him over the series as well. So we saw some good solo lane performance from Suning, and we saw good objective play from them, I think, excluding game one of that series. In game one of that series, they basically coin flipped the game around a Herald. They lost that coin flip and they lost the game off of it. But in the following games, we saw that they were able to secure dragons, secure barons for themselves, and they won game two using that strategy, secured a lot of drakes for themselves, secured the soul, took a baron on top of it, and won the game. In game three of that spring series, Kanavi locked in his Olaf, which back then was one of his picks. It has fallen out of the meta now, so the fact that he ran over the game with that Olaf pick and secured early kills, secured early Drake, secured the Drake soul at 23 minutes into the game, I think. I think the Olaf is not as viable anymore right now. I think that would not happen today the way it happened back in spring. So overall, JDG won that first series, but there were some strong points for Suning, and I think it was their solo lanes and it was their coordination around objectives. When we then jump into summer, their second best of three series of this year, we have a much clearer picture where JDG were able to take the series 2-0. And in the first game of that series, the game was pretty back and forth. JDG was able to secure early drakes, but on the other hand, Suning took early kills and the gold lead, 4k at 20 minutes. When we see teams at this World Championship have a 4k gold lead at 20 minutes, that game is done most of the time. Most teams right now are really good at snowballing a lead like that into a win. Sadly, Suning were not able to do that. They started to contest dragons, which of course they had to, because they don't want to give over the soul for free. But in doing so, they secured the dragons, but they gave over kills to JDG and they gave over shutdowns, so the gold balanced out. And then in the later stages of the game, the team composition that Suning had drafted with the Wukong in top lane and the Twisted Fate in bot didn't manage to execute on their game plan of diving the backline. JDG had drafted the Ezreal and the Yuumi, and Suning weren't able to take them out. On the other hand, JDG's top side in Renekton and I think it was the Jarvan IV in this game were able to hold the backline of Suning quite well. And then when Ezreal, Yuumi and also the Zoe took out the Wukong and the Twisted Fate, they were able to join the team fight and secure the win for JDG. In game 2, we saw a bit of an early lane kingdom for Zoom over Bin. He got an early gank from Kanavi on the Lee Sin. Zoom himself was on the Ornn against Bin's Renekton. And with that first kill due to the Lee Sin gank, he was then able to snowball that a little bit, create a CS advantage for himself, take down Zoom solo again later on. But when Zoom on the Ornn then started grouping with his team to secure some objectives, that allowed Bin to get back into the game. And around the mid game, the game was actually pretty even. But JDG had the better scaling team fighting composition with the Ornn in the top lane, the Ezreal and the Bard in the bot lane. And in mid jungle, they had the Lee Sin and the Lissandra. The Lissandra as a counter pick to LeBlanc mainly, but in the later stages of the game, their team comp played out quite well with the Lee Sin and the Lissandra going for picks to open up fights. And then you had the Ornn, Ezreal, and actually it was a set in support, and the set, this trio, very good engage, very good front to back team fighting. They then were able to close those fights that the LeBlanc and the Lee Sin started with a pick. It still was a very sloppy game. This was not a good game by JDG by any means. Suning were able to break open JDG's base, threatened backdoors multiple times in this game, but they weren't successful with them, and so that allowed JDG to then take more objectives, take Drakes, take a Baron, and close the game with it. So overall, Zoom definitely showed himself in this series, showed that he could win even in the matchup of the Ornn into the Renekton. And yes, JDG were able to close it out 2-0. Coming into this quarterfinals at Worlds, we have now seen many more games from both of these teams, JDG making it all the way to the LPL finals. In spring, they won it. In summer, they made it to the finals again and closely lost out to Top Esports. And Suning made it to the semifinals against Top Esports themselves, then dropped down to the regional qualifier where they took the third seed over LGD. And in group stage, both of these teams performed reasonably well. Suning actually better than JDG, taking down G2 Esports in a tiebreaker for first seed out of that group. Admittedly, they didn't have Damwon Gaming in their group, so their first seed was definitely easier to take than for JDG. But, you know, JDG, they also dropped games to PSG. They got out second, and so now here we are into the quarterfinals, into this domestic matchup. I now want to go role by role, discuss the matchups of these players, the win conditions, where the strengths lie for each team, and then just shortly go into the draft, because I think there's some high priority picks that both teams will want to contest and that are going to be very important for the outcome of this series. So in top, Zoom has been touted as the best player, the best top laner coming out of China this year. But we've now all seen what Bin can do. We've seen his insane GP play against G2 Esports, and actually Bin is the more carry-oriented top laner of the two. During Season 10, Zoom has spent much more time on the Ornn and on the Volibear, and has only spent a little bit of time on the carries, on the Camille. And on the other hand, when you look at Bin's match history, he's been playing the Renekton, the Jax, the Zed, the Camille all year long. Coming into this World Championship, Zoom has actually dropped the tank priority, and he has also gone towards the Camille and the Renekton. He even brought out the Kayle. So I think coming from groups, the playstyle of these two top laners is very similar. They both go for the carries, and the level they have shown in groups I think was also very similar. So to me, these carry versus carry matchups are very unstable, where even one gank from one of the junglers, maybe Herald, maybe a turret dive, can just decide the matchup in one player's favor, and then that player will have the control of the lane for the rest of the game, basically. So I think a lot of this lane comes down to how the junglers will match up. And I think the same can be said for the mid laners. As I already mentioned, Angel in the past has been able to outperform Yagao. The other way around has been true as well. We've also seen games where Yagao has definitely performed better than Angel, but on average, I think that Angel has a slight edge right now over Yagao. For Angel, he's a big Syndra player. He's already played it 3 times at this World Championship. It's one of his most played champions throughout the season. And when he's forced off of the Syndra, he mostly gravitates to champions with global presence, like the Galio and the Twisted Fate. And the Galio and the Twisted Fate are also picks for Yagao. He's mostly known for his LeBlanc and his Zoe. And right now at the World Championship, he's also picked up the Echo, already played that twice. So once again, I would give the slight advantage to Angel, but just like the top lane, this matchup is heavily influenced by the jungle matchup. Both of these junglers are Lee Sin and Graves players, but because Lee Sin is not in the meta right now, they have both dropped the Lee Sin priority, and so I think the Graves will be one of the most important picks in this series. Both junglers will want to get their hands on that, and so I think the red side team will often be forced to ban that in the first rotation, just so the blue side team won't be able to first pick that. After that, their champion pools are quite different. SOFM likes to go in the more tanky early game skirmishers like the Trundle, the Jarvan, the Olaf, and then Kanavi likes to go towards the carry junglers recently, the Lilias, the Nidalee, the Kindred as well. So I think that Kanavi comes in with the slight edge over SOFM. SOFM has performing really well as well, and I think this matchup can just be decided by who gets Graves if he goes through, and if not, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a carry jungler for JDG and an early game jungler for Suning. Coming down to the bot lane, we have a pretty similar picture for both of these ADCs. Both have played a lot of Ashe, Ezreal, and Aphelios throughout season 10. Aphelios lately has obviously fallen out of the meta. We've seen him picked up sometimes when you build a hyper carry comp, but he's not as strong anymore as he was in spring. And so now we've also seen the Jhin and the Senna from Huan Fang. He has already shown that he will also be able to bring out his pocket pick of the Draven. And Loken, he has shown that in this World Championship, he will go a little bit more towards Miss Fortune or the Caitlyn. I think that the ADC priority in this draft will fall pretty low because both of these players have pretty deep champion pools, and even if you dedicate bans towards the Ezreal, the Ashe, the Kate, Loken can still pick up the Miss Fortune. Huan Fang can still pick up the Jhin, the Senna, and so I think most ADCs will go unbanned. Maybe the Ashe, just because it's so strong and so versatile, so much early priority, so much engage potential, just so much utility all around. Maybe that will be a ban, but I don't think there will be many bans on the ADC, and I don't think they will be very high draft priority in this pick ban. The support will be much more draft priority because both of these players, Sword Art for Suning and Lumao for JDG, love the Bard. And next to the Graves, I think that is the most or second most important pick of the series. I expect it to be 100% pick ban, just like the Graves. And once again, maybe the red side team will be forced to ban that out just to not give it over to the blue side team with the first pick. Or maybe we see a scenario where both are left open and we trade the Graves for the Bard. Below the Bard, there's actually one very interesting difference in these two players, and that is that Sword Art has been very successful with the Nautilus, which I think is the second most picked champion this year, whereas Lumao has only brought out the Nautilus 3 times. This is a big meta pick, so throughout this entire year, only 3 games of Nautilus with a 0% win rate. Instead, Lumao likes to go towards the Leona, the Thresh, which are also big picks for Sword Art. He also likes to go into the Tahm Kench. And I think for Suning, it might be viable to ban out the supports, ban out the Bard, the Leona, the Thresh, and after that, Lumao shows the tendency to go into like the Set, the Pantheon. So maybe it will be a viable strategy to ban out the big 3 supports for Lumao, take the Set first pick or take it in the second rotation, and prepare yourself a strategy to deal with his Pantheon. And I think that can be very, very successful for Suning, because that would in some ways neutralize one of JDG's best players, which is Lumao. His coordination with Kanavi has been very strong throughout this year, has helped them win spring, get to finals in summer, and now get to the quarterfinals here at Worlds. I think that Bin has definitely shown recently that he can step up to Zoom, but as I said, I anticipate these players to probably play carry versus carry matchups, and that can be heavily decided by who gets the first advantage, who gets maybe the first gank, who gets more jungle advantage. And that could very well decide games in this meta where we see the Camille and the Jackson in the top lane. And if one of those gets an advantage over the other, he might just run over the game. Overall, I expect a very close series, much closer than today's series. I expect a 3-2 for JDG. I think Suning have come on leaps and bounds in these couple of months, couple of weeks lately, from the Chinese playoffs to the group stage of Worlds now. But I think JDG still have a little bit of an edge on them. I think they have the better players slightly. I think they have the better macro slightly. And I think they will win out the series very closely. But I think Suning will take 2 games off them. If you want to discuss any of this, please do it in the comments right below. Please do it on Twitter, at esportsidaho. And as always, thanks for watching.